Hey guys, this is Calvin Williams with Improver Technologies, and I'm here with Hal Frohreich. He is a nationally recognized lean professional, global coach, and mentor to CEOs and operations teams. Hal, want to give a brief introduction of your business background. I know you and I have had some great conversations over the last 6 or so weeks, maybe a little bit more here, about Improver and Kata and some other great stuff. So just want to give my audience a some more exposure to you and your background because you've got some really great experiences and some really cool things to contribute to the conversation. So yeah, if you want to talk us through a little bit about yourself, your background as a business leader, and then we'll sort of take it from there.
So I got into the lean world via the TPM world. And back in '86, that's when some of the TPM books were being printed, the brown one, the green one, the blue one, all those.
Yeah.
And I read them and they made sense to me. Lean didn't make sense to me at that time. I was working for Boeing. And at that
Yeah.
time, you built airplanes one at a time. Each one was custom. I didn't
Right.
see where lean really applied, but boy, I sure did see where TPM applied.
So that's interesting. So yeah, so the aircraft industry had sort of a late start to continuous improvement, if I as I understand it.
Oh, they did. It was probably in the '90s before they even really started getting serious about it.
Right, right. I know a lot. I know Lean's bubble was probably in the early '80s, and then it seems like aircraft came on maybe a decade later. So what's your experience with Lean and continuous improvement in the aircraft industry specifically?
Well, the TPM gave me an opportunity to go into Boeing and actually start the Boeing TPM program.
Wow. Okay. Very cool.
And it was kind of interesting how we got into it. One of the senior engineers got very interested in it and wanted to start with autonomous maintenance. So he had hooked us up with Ford. And at that time, Red Poling was running Ford. And we got to go back and visit, go to some of their autonomous maintenance workshops and things like that. And I went back, developed a workshop, and ended up teaching uh, that as a starting point in TPM.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then what was interesting then is what does TPM look like? And so we kind of pursued what we call the maintenance excellence program. Is when we were all done. Uh,
Right.
that's what we ended up calling it. But at the same time, I was working with Dr. Joseph Harless, who is a Georgia guy.
Yeah.
He
Yeah. You mentioned it to
passed
me.
away a couple of years ago, but
Right. Good.
he had a way of looking at human performance, and he looked at the things you brought to a job and what you left behind was an accomplishment. So when we started looking at accomplishment based type business things for TPM, it was kind of a very simple one. It was equipment or processes ready to produce with 100% quality when needed by the shop.
Right.
And so when
Okay.
we built the TPM or maintenance excellence thing, is if it didn't happen, if it didn't make that happen, if the machine wasn't ready or the process wasn't ready, 100% of the time when the shop needs it with 100% quality, then don't do it.
Don't do it. You got more work to do on the maintenance end before you start it up.
Right. And this encompassed everybody. I mean, we ended up calling it the Holy Scroll. It went around a room.
Holy scroll, huh? That's
Yeah,
funny.
because we took butcher paper and we designed this over 2 weeks that we put up the various accomplishments we wanted out of each department that all hit the main one and put down probably a tier, at least 3 or 4 tiers that we then handed off to the individual groups and they developed the rest of them. And so
Interesting.
this is what kind of ignited the whole Boeing commercial lean program that ended up going around the company.
Interesting.
And so from there, I was asked to go out and work our supply base. So now I've encompassed TPM, but now I'm going into the lean world. And I was kind of fortunate that Boeing had hired the Shingijutsu Corporation then. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with them or not, but these are the ex-retired Toyota executives that were in the Ono's original study group. So, essentially, we're the second generation of people taught by the original generation of the Ono group, the Ono study groups.
Yeah, are they related to the JIPM, Japanese Institute of Plant Management or Plant Maintenance?
No, that's a whole separate entity.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, these guys were directly out of Toyota.
Gotcha. Okay, retired Toyota leaders.
Right. And so my main sensei was Mahara-san, and spent roughly 12 years with him. Not every day. I mean, it was a week here, a week there, a week here, a week there. Plus, he wanted me to work with some of the other consultants out of Shingijutsu that had more expertise in other areas that he didn't.
So, from that coaching experience, what do you think were the biggest takeaways?
The biggest takeaways with them is we were being taught kata and didn't realize what it was.
That's interesting. That was sort of my experience with kata too, but I'm very curious to learn how you got into kata, because I know you're very passionate and engaged with the kata the practice of kata. So yeah, can you dive into that a little more, like what that experience was for you?
Well, I'm sure a lot of your people may know Mark Rosenthal from LinkedIn and from the website The Lien Thinker. So he and I have worked together over a lot of years.
Oh, cool.
And there's probably a couple chairs down at the Smoky Point Starbucks that have big calluses on them, where we've sat down and kind of analyzed, because we both started Lien around the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
And where it's gone through and what we were taught. And we really sat down and said, they didn't use the kata terms. They used the same stuff. It was a PDCA cycle.
Right. The scientific method, ultimately, right?
A scientific method. And that's what they were teaching us. But it wasn't, formatted, or the board didn't run that way. I mean, we were on what I call the typical Kaizen event.
Right. Okay.
I mean, these guys are flying in from Japan. They're there for a week. How do you get something accomplished for a week that they can move on to the next company? So that seemed to be the early model for Lien, was the Kaizen event.
Right. Just more. I think that's very, very convenient for a consulting practice, is because you got a limited time frame and you want to make a huge impact.
Well, but it's very unfortunate for the factory, and this is where things like Impruver and stuff like that come into play.
Absolutely.
With the Kaizen event, usually, everybody wants a KPO office, a Kaizen promotion office.
Right. Yep.
So they come into an area and they get it ready for the Kaizen event. So they go out and they'll usually take the measures and they'll arrange the whole thing, and then they'll come in and do the shop. Yep. And then afterwards, everybody that was in that Kaizen event looks up and says, "Wow, where did everybody go?" that was like a drive-by.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but they've got a Kaizen newspaper and a million things to work off in the next 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And most of the time, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And it's also, they'll touch so many things that people can't even keep track.
Right. And it's whereas you sort of leave the organization behind, right? It's as a change agent,
you do.
A lot of time, continuous improvement people can go a lot faster than the broader organization.
Well, and what did they learn?
Exactly, and you leave the people development piece
out of it.
It doesn't get quite where you want it to get,
and it never really sinks into the culture,
right?
Okay, because everybody has something you do culturally. I don't care if it's your morning routine. You get out of bed, what do?
Yeah,
that becomes your daily culture.
It's just your rituals, right?
Yeah, your rituals, your patterns, the things you do.
Yep.
And with kata, it's something you're touching something every day,
right?
And it's a small enough chunk that you don't lose sight of it,
right?
Okay, so one of the things that I'm looking at now, Tracy Defoe up in British Columbia, she and I live close enough. We get together quite a bit. We're kind of doing a deep dive on state of Lien, state of kata, where is it, how is it morphed, and things like that. And, we're finding some interesting patterns in the in the implementation. Number one, we're finding out that a lot of companies that are legacy lean,
Yep.
let's say they've been doing it for 10, 20 years, they have their Mandarin organization built in.
Yes.
If you remember how the Mandarins were in China, you had to know Mandarin, number one, to be in it, and writing and take a big test and all that stuff.
Okay. Interesting.
So they've made lean part of this inner circle.
Interesting. Okay. So
And,
does that mean it's not getting to the broader community, or is it?
if you look at it, it isn't. And I think what we're finding, let's put it this way. We posted some questions on LinkedIn. Very few people answered them on LinkedIn. They private messaged us and said, I don't mind talking to you, but I'm not going to identify my company.
Wow.
And here's why.
Oh, okay. So,
all right.
So what's driving the need for such secrecy and privacy?
Well, that's what we're finding is that most people, because they are legacy, all right, are not going to fight City Hall and try to bring in something new. You have to remember something. Most lean people, I'm going to say 90% of them, are the worst people for change you will ever find in your life.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Lean people do not embrace change.
I can admit that I've experienced that as well, dealing with some lean people. Not all, some.
Well, she was in Nova Scotia a couple of weeks ago, and it was the legacy lean people that were trying to sabotage the people that were out doing Kata.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting.
Because they want to defend their turf.
Yeah, and that's an interesting dynamic because Kata was officially introduced by Mike Rother in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
But Lean has been around much longer. I mean, Lean, before it was called Lean, was around since the 40s or 50s. That's my kids say, back in the 19s.
Yeah, back in the 19s. Well, actually, you can go back further than that. You can go back to the Venetians.
Yeah, well, yeah, I imagine they were probably getting to the root cause long before 1940. So,
well, no, the Venetians couldn't afford to keep a standing navy.
Oh, interesting.
So they built their shipyard that when they weren't at war, all the ships were stored on the shore. And when they went to war, they ran them down through an assembly line and floated them out, and the sails were added, the cannons were added, the food was added, the people were added, and off they sailed to war.
They had one piece flow even back then, huh?
Back then, wow, that's correct.
That's a neat story.
And so and one of the things I'm finding that's interesting to me is that every generation thinks they know more than the previous generation.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty natural.
Well, and one of my heroes is Ben Franklin.
Yeah, Ben's great
because Ben had daily standard work.
Interesting. Okay.
He was a printer. He had a diary, and he meticulously planned out his days. And he always started his day with, "What good shall I do?" So he had a challenge.
Interesting. That's the agile approach too, right?
Correct. And then at the end of the day, he had a Hansai, a reflection.
Oh, yes.
Okay, what goodness did I do?
Interesting. Very cool. And he recorded all that too, just for his record?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can, if you can go on Amazon to Kindle and get his autobiography.
Oh.
Because he had 13 virtues that he identified as something that you need to follow.
Interesting. Okay.
And out of those 13 virtues, I mean, you can really, if you look at his day and how he set it out, and it's kind of the Kata, almost the Kata something. I mean, this is what you're trying to do with Kata. It boiled down to 4 things: teach something, create something, repair something, or improve something.
Wow. Very good. That's pretty fascinating.
That's what he put under. Well, that was one of his virtues: industry. Lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off all unnecessary actions. That was one of his virtues.
That's deep. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going to check that book out. You think they got it on Audible? I'm an Audible guy.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
I'll check that.
You'd have to check it.
Yeah.
I don't blame you, though. We're both commuting. But in the Kata world, and I think what I'm seeing is when I started Kata, it was when Rother had first published it. So it really wasn't a community. There wasn't, I mean, it was just a posting on the website, the University of Michigan website. And there wasn't anybody to really go out and tap and say, well, what does this mean?
Yeah.
So I had to sit down and figure a lot of it out myself. And a lot of that was by experiments.
And that's
It wasn't
that's the Kata
until
method too, right? Through experimentation, right? So you were practicing Kata in order to learn Kata.
that's right. Well, and it's the same thing with how I learned TPM. It was all experiments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny.
So
There was some posts. I try to keep up with my network on LinkedIn, and there was some posts about how folks are inundated with data, but still thirsty for knowledge. And my first reaction was, you know, the best, most important, the most relevant data you can possibly get is the data you get after you've already taken action. And
correct,
we tend to get caught
correct.
up in analysis paralysis and in the effort to decide what action to take. I'm more on the side of just get, you know, an idea from the data, but then take action. And that's where the real valuable data comes, right? After you see the
Well,
result.
and in the lean world, improver would be heresy
Yes.
because number one, that's not officially sanctioned by anybody.
Right.
It doesn't follow the regular lean path of doing
So
things.
that's the question I want to ask you about too regarding Kata versus lean, right? There's a Kata mentality of experiment, try things, see what happens, learn from what you try. And then there's lean, which is, in my view, and maybe I want to understand what your view is a little more scripted. You need to do it this way. This is sort of the Bible, and you must not break the commandments of lean. So what's been your experience and the difference between the Kata approach versus the traditional lean approach?
So to give you a nice tagline for that, heretics and unbelievers will be burned at stake.
Oh boy. Dang.
Okay.
Yes.
That's how a lot of the world views it. Okay?
I've seen that. Yes. I've seen that in multi-billion-dollar companies. They come in with lean and they say, we're going to carry the wounded and bury the dissenters.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
That's the mentality.
Heretics and unbelievers burned at stake.
Non-believers burn. Yeah.
And if you look at it, and I've changed my mindset a lot over the years because I've kind of grown up with lean and how it's been implemented around the world. In fact, I've implemented it around the world.
Wow.
I know where it's worked. I know where it hasn't worked. I know a lot of the early companies that I have that are still doing it.
Right.
The fascinating thing is they're legacy lean companies now.
Right.
I mean, all you have to do is go to say KataCon or something like that, find out who's there and who's not there.
Interesting.
And you don't see people like from Danaher.
Interesting.
You don't see people, some of the ones that have been doing lean for a long time. They're not there.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's like I said, that is their system. They name it. They'll call it like we'll use good old Wile E. Coyote, the Acme production system.
Yeah, they sort of rebranded it for their own practical purpose.
And you have to get certified in it, and you have to do this, and you have to do that.
So
last time I checked, and the way I was taught, the Singha-Jitsus didn't give you certificates. They didn't do anything. They just said, go out and do improvement. Period.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Right.
That's it. I mean, the only way to gain knowledge is to go out and do.
You got to try things and see what happens. So that's an interesting concept, right? Because it sort of leads to, if you think about Six Sigma, and I think Six Sigma may have, I don't know if they just took this idea to another level or if they introduced it themselves, is, you got to first get to be a yellow belt, and then you get to be a green belt, and then you get to be a black belt, then the master black belt. Even TPM is set up in steps where you got to progress through AM step 1 before you can go to AM step 2, for example.
Well, and this is the interesting thing on a lot of these things is follow the money.
Yeah.
If there's an organization built around it, it's like I just had to go out and get a couple ISO certifications.
Yep.
All right. So I just spent $700-800 on getting certified in 2 ISO things.
Yeah.
All right. But yet there's books. I could have read books and gone out and done it. But no, to be official, you got to be certified.
You got to be certified.
It's the same thing with, being a black belt. Really, what's funny to me is when you hear somebody say, well, I'm a green belt in Six Sigma. Oh, really? And what have you done with it? Well, I went to class.
Right.
And then that got the green belt. Yeah, but what have you done
I got
afterwards?
this.
How many
I got this FMEA spreadsheet.
Well, that's it.
that I
Okay.
never
And
used.
so exactly. And so with Kata, okay, and I do have feedback on Improver. I mean, I know your audience wants honest feedback on it, and I'm going to give it to them.
Yeah, fair enough.
The Kata, uh, it is experimenting, okay, and some of the big disconnects that I found in Kata was that in Rother's camp and stuff like that, they made a lot of assumptions.
Hmm.
Number one, that everybody would know value stream mapping,
Hmm.
know what it means, know what the terminology means, know what the jargon means, and would be able to go out and do a value stream map and apply that the to the Kata method.
Interesting. Okay.
They also made a lot of assumptions that people would understand Lean. Okay, they would understand the toolbox of Lean. If what the let's just say one of the things you wanted to work on was your inventory system. Now you don't have to use a buzzword. You don't say, "Well, I need to build a Kanban system."
Right. Right.
Okay, you can say, "No, I want to get my inventory under control."
Yeah.
Right, and so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use the buzzwords.
Exactly.
If you're doing SMED, right, single minute exchange of die, well, you want to do a setup production program.
Right. That's just
Right?
branding of. So that's an interesting thought is that, if you go inside Toyota, they don't use any of those buzzwords. If you talk to a
No,
true Toyota person, fresh out of a Toyota plant, and you go to them and say value stream map or SMED or any of those tools, they probably look at you in complete confusion.
oh, they do. In fact, the Singajitsu's Nikao was the head of the company, and he couldn't understand why anybody would use a value stream map at all.
Wow, interesting.
Absolutely, and in fact, he really chewed his guys up if they even looked at one. If somebody from Boeing brought him a value stream map when they first started doing it,
Interesting.
he'd say, "What the hell? That's not the way we do things."
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, they don't really document a lot of continuous improvement processes that they use. And it's more
No,
passed on through stories and conversations, and it's so embedded into their mindset as leaders that they don't need brand names and the names of certain tools, and I don't think they really think of tools the way the rest of us do.
no,
Outside.
I think what they look is how do you educate yourself. I mean, let's take one part of Improver, OEE. Okay,
Yep.
OEE isn't a metric that you collect 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean, if you look at statistics, they say, hey, if you go collect data 21 times, that'll give you enough feedback to figure out what you got to go work on.
Statistical sample size 21.
Yeah, that's it. So OEE, you're going to go up and collect OEE, and you're going to look at this thing. And it's interesting. It may be one of many things that's causing the OEE to go down.
Right.
It might be, oh, okay, our setup time is too long. It might be equipment breakdown. It might be changeover. It might be any one of those things that once you've got that challenge, okay, you found your obstacle, then forget collecting OEE and then go switch to the Kata and say, okay, here we're going to do what would be termed in TPM land as small group activity.
Yep.
But you can use the Kata board as your backbone for how you want to work the improvement.
There you go.
Now, what it also should lend itself to is a desire to learn more.
That's exactly, yeah.
Okay.
That's the key, right?
And that's the key. So like a lot of times when I had, and this is the way I ran my own plant too, I did a different coaching style than what Kata does. I had the routine we did during the actual Kata thing, but then I'm also looking at how am I developing people. That's my major job, developing people.
There you go. That's what it's really
Probably
about,
the
right?
best accomplishment I can say in my life is how many people have I left behind that are smarter than me and can go do more than me because they got the right development path.
Yeah. There's
And
something out there
so,
that says leaders, you're not measured by, I think it's Gandhi who said, you're not measured by how many followers you have, but it's how many leaders you've created.
And that's been my whole thing. I mean, I'm very happy to see somebody go on to their next job and work their way up the
And
system.
just really reach their potential, huh? That's awesome.
And that's it. I mean, that's my sole job. I mean, it is, as far as a Lean at all, it is develop people.
Good. Excellent.
So when they're looking at the OEE and it leads to something that's in the TPM realm, I don't have any problem pulling them and say, hey, look, if you want to know more about this, okay, if you want to know about TPM, well, here's some books you can get. Here's some videos you can do. I'm not going to sit here and spoon feed it to you.
Mm.
You've got to look at it yourself and decide what applies and what doesn't. And then what do you want to go experiment around?
Do you think that traditional Lean will start there first, and then Kata go too far to spoon feed people tools and methods?
I think the thing I like about Kata and especially, I mean, you're not really doing a whole lot of formal Kata training with the people.
Hmm.
At least I don't think you are. I don't know. I mean, you're not spending months and months with them.
No, I mean you shouldn't, right? Because
No,
believe it or not,
I mean,
the scientific method and PDCA is should be a bit more intuitive than what we may give it credit for.
Well, that's it. I think what's happened is, if you get a bunch of consultants on something, they're going to make a way to make it seem more confusing.
Yeah,
and it's a secret club,
right? Yeah,
that you have to join to be able to do it, and that's not what I don't think that's why Mike invented it.
No, and I think what tends to happen is people in general, and Lean experts are no exception. Maybe even worse in this specific thing is they tend to make themselves gatekeepers. They tend to say, in order for you to progress and get this badge that I've created, you got to jump through the loops that I've created for you to jump through. And once you've proven yourself to me, then you can progress. When the nature doesn't work that way, the proof is in the results, right?
Well, and if you look at how people learn, I mean, it's interesting that there's like 6 or 7 different ways you can learn.
Yeah.
You can go out and discover it by accident. It could be spoon fed to you. You can read. Some people are intuitive. They can just look at it and figure it out. But you almost have to go through all 6 different styles of learning before it assimilates in your head and you go do it.
Right. Interesting.
So with Kata, okay, as long as they understand, okay, it's a challenge. And really what the challenge is saying is, what do you want to accomplish? And one of the challenges I always give the C-suite people, because they're the worst at this.
Interesting.
Is you go ahead and you write your vision down. And then you get your team together and you sit them down and say, here's my vision. Now, each one of you on a Post-it note, I want you to write down what that vision means to you. What am I telling you to go work on, and what am I telling you to forget?
You translate, right?
And then have everybody say what that is and go hang it up on the board. You will get 50 different opinions of what that vision is.
Right. Interesting.
Now a challenge at least cuts it down to an immediate thing, but even then, it's still open to interpretation. What does that challenge really mean?
Right. There has to be some feedback loop that drives that vertical alignment, vertical and horizontal alignment, right?
And it's got to be small. You're not going to go out and solve world hunger with this stuff. That's not the whole object of Kata. It is take nice small chunks and progress naturally. I mean, it's like if you ask somebody, if we go down the Kata thing, how many people even understand what a hypothesis is? Science isn't anything they really teach in school anymore. I mean, when I was in school, in grade school, we had, 6 years of science.
Yeah, I remember that too. You're right. I don't think my kids study science in the same way. They're trying to get back into STEM more.
Right. But you have a whole 2 generations now that have not had the education that we've had.
Yeah, I remember studying the scientific method verbatim, and actually doing experiments right there in the classroom and collecting data and trying different things and learning how to experiment properly.
Right. And what's always funny about that, is when the teacher asks you, well, is this acid neutralized? And you say, "Oh, of course it is," and he throws another salt ball in it, and the thing spews up and about burns you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but let's look at the kata. Okay, so a hypothesis. How many people look at that and really understand what that means in a kata type thing? What does a hypothesis mean?
Hmm.
So, in some respects, the training has to be very simple, starting on very, very, very
Basic,
simple
simple.
stuff.
Right.
I mean, in every factory I've been into, it's always amazing to me because it's kind of like a Hollywood movie, and you can stand still, but yet everything's going by you at 50,000 miles an hour. And if you watch the supervisors, you watch the managers, and you watch the leads, it's always easy to spot them because they've got expedite lists in their hands. They're carrying parts back to the upstream or downstream, wherever the quality issue is. They don't have a stable day. They don't have a controlled day.
Interesting. Mm.
And so, to me, the best way to start, and the way I've started with a lot of plants now, is let's just create a stable day for everybody. Let's not go worry about initiatives. Let's not go worry about this. Let's just say, C-suite, go down and see what is the current state of
What's
your plant.
normal for your business?
Control, yeah, in control, out of control. Are the people having a nice work day? Are they engaged? Until they can go out and ask these basic questions, I wouldn't put initiative in front of anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, my experience, and I've worked in the factories for a long time, for probably 12 years or so, or more even. And what happens when the C-level folks come into the plant is when they rarely come, right? Once every couple of years, they rarely come. But when they come, everybody behaves differently. We
Oh yeah,
jump through.
and they stage the
They
plant.
stage the plant. We jump through a
That's
week
it.
of hoops, tightening every bolt, painting every wall, and painting the floor,
Oh yeah.
painting machines. Can you believe that?
Oh,
In preparation.
I did my stint in the military, so yes.
Yeah, and it's and it's like everybody be on your best behavior. Don't act normally. Don't act like you normally act. Whatever you do, these folks are coming to see the plant. Don't act normal.
Right.
And then what ends up happening is the leaders come into the plant and they're looking for something wrong, and they can't wait to point out something you missed, just so they can show how in tune they are to how you should be running your plant.
Yes, and they know more than you
and
know.
that they know more. Yeah, exactly.
But and what's always interesting to me is there's simple formulas for writing hypothesis, but that's not really how you teach people to do kata.
Interesting. Okay.
Yet it's an important part of how you learn.
Right.
And so, what I've almost started focusing on when I first started kata was the basics. Okay, there's a few basic things you need for running your plant. Number one is that stable day. Does everybody have their standard work? I don't mean the job standard work. I mean their standard work for the day, the Ben Franklin way. What's your day look like? How is it planned out?
What do you need to accomplish?
What do you need to accomplish? Do you have a method to train people? Okay. If you look back to, again, every generation thinks they know more than the old generation. How did they train people back in the days of the guilds in the 1400s? Okay. So most supervisors have now abdicated that responsibility. They don't do it. Whereas if you go into TWI, the training within industry, now it says, no, the supervisor's job is responsible. They're responsible to train their person.
Right. That's one of the biggest,
side by
one of their
side,
most important jobs.
And you don't leave their side until they're competent.
Right. Exactly. And then you still continue to develop them even after that to some extent.
Right. And then you have maybe some basic visual metrics. You don't have to have metrics to measure your metrics. It might be just as simple as how much stuff you putting through an hour.
Metrics to measure your metrics. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Getting that bad with the data.
Well, that's it. And so, having a way to manage their day, how to train their people, and how to monitor how it's going, that's basic stuff.
Yeah.
You could spend a year doing kata every day before those three things are done.
Wow. Wow.
Because one thing will begat another thing, and will begat another thing, and will begat another thing. Every obstacle will appear.
And I guess if if you really can get people on a track of self-development and self-learning, then that's the track you want them on, right? You want to be able to go up to them at any point and say, "Hey, what are you experimenting with?" And they can give you at least one thing that they're working on. Working there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, let's think about it. Okay, so supervisors got this god awful day. They come into work early. They already know they're behind the eight ball. They've got quality issues. They've got people issues. They've got this. They haven't cross-trained enough to, if they get a bunch of people that call in sick, they don't have anybody to fill in the spots. Now you're grabbing, old Joe who doesn't know anything, and hey, train new Joe that doesn't know anything either, and let's try to get this job done. And then they produce defects.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. So if you look at those three things, if you're doing a kata and that's your challenge, how long would it take you to go through and just straighten out that one obstacle?
Just focus on that one thing, control everything else, and focus on that.
That's it. I mean, just the one thing, and that's not all the issues they have during the day.
No, but if you never nail down the one and you try to do 1,000,000 at once, then you never really make progress on any of them.
You might as well do a Kaizen event.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting part of this stuff is that kata, what it's really saying is, here's what you have permission to work on, and here's what I want you to ignore.
That's right. We know those are issues. We know those are out there.
They're out there, and time will. But there's a progression of. It's like what's that game Jenga where they stack the wood up and you pull them out.
Jenga.
That's it. I mean that's essentially what you're playing with. It's like a Jenga puzzle.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You can do a whole lot of things before the thing comes collapsing down, but the whole object is work each one of them off and take it
do
down
one at a time,
at a level.
Do one, stabilize, then do another and stabilize.
Right. And so with kata, to me, the way it's going, with Impruver and stuff like that is, go out and play with it for a while. Now, then when it's time to really start formalizing it, then you might want to go get some outside coaching.
Right. There you go.
At least do your own self-discovery first.
Yeah, I like your point about OEE tracking. I know there's, as an industry, companies are demanding more continuous tracking of OEE. The direction Improver's going in too, though, is custom data collection, right? Where you can collect data on anything at any time, even if it's just for a 3-week time frame, to improve that thing for now. Get the results, get the learning, and then scrap that data collection or that metric. Move on to the next thing you're looking to improve.
Yeah, I mean, like what we've discussed is you can get completely lost in data.
You could. Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you're doing samplings and you're starting at a basic level, basic manufacturing 101, okay, build the tack time. Can you do that?
Do you know what that is and why? Why it's important, right?
That's it. That's important. And then there's a lot of observation that goes on in this stuff. If you're, say, the primary kata coach, you have got to spend a great deal of time just observing the areas that you're coaching.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, that's on key. You've got to understand what's going on in their areas.
That's a key.
That's key. You've also got how to ask the questions.
That's key. That's key. And you got to develop a baseline in your own mind. I'm leading a startup for Improver. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of folks who have built and created successful technology companies. And you wouldn't believe how many people just will throw advice as if they're, have some level of entitlement to advise without even developing a baseline understanding of the company, the market, the specific areas of focus, what I'm trying to accomplish. And it's like, as a coach, that's a key skill set you got to have is listen first. listen and ask questions first. Understand the environment that, understand the total picture, and then help figure out the next best thing to do. Because obviously you can't do
Right.
everything. So feeding a person everything at once is not necessarily good coaching. Because if I pick the wrong thing, I'm still gonna fail to work on. Right.
Well, and then the one thing is that people forget the first rule of coaching: shut up and
And
listen.
listen, yeah.
It isn't, it isn't. I mean, I've heard there's three different styles of coaching. There's telling, there's teaching, there's first is shut up and
Yeah.
listen.
Let's do that first.
And anytime you think you want to speak, shut up and
Let's
listen.
go in not knowing, and then
That's right.
and then
And then
learn through experience.
and then learn how to ask questions.
Yeah, that's key.
And not the type of questions that lead the witness. I mean, ask the questions that are getting to a deeper thought level.
A lot of time, what I find through asking questions is people figure it out on their own.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people. You have to remember that everybody in there knows more than you do.
Yeah,
They live there every day.
about what they're doing. They know more than you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
My wife has become my coach unwittingly.
Oh, they're all good at that. They're so good at that.
Anytime I got
you always marry above your station.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I had to do that, definitely. But anytime I have a challenge or something I don't know what to do, she'll just let me talk. And I'll talk myself to the solution. And I'll finish the conversation. Oh, thank you. You're the best, babe. I don't know how you have so many great ideas. And she's like, well.
Yeah. She didn't give you any idea. She just let you talk yourself out.
Yeah, she just let me talk myself to my next experiment, because really an idea is just an experiment to be run.
That's it. And experiments can last 2 minutes, and they can last 24 hours. They can last even longer than that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, if you look at, let's say, implementing a Kanban system, it's not unusual to take 3 or 4 months.
Right, I know. Before you can learn what you're trying to learn, right? Because that's what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to learn from the.
Well, the other thing is to scale things down. Okay, I mean, if you're going to try stuff out, like I said, don't try to eat the elephant. Pick one area that you might want to put a Kanban system in. It might be replenishment of sandpaper. Okay, and you're gonna just say, okay, I want a 2-bin system in there, nice and simple. And I want to be able to make sure I've got it stocked right and it gets restocked. And I've got to, connect the material people and the procurement people. There's a lot of stuff to this, a lot of moving parts.
Right.
But you can get everybody involved and say, okay, we're going to take on just this little tiny project. We're going to restock sandpaper on the production line. But from here, we're going to have our template for how the whole big thing works.
Interesting.
And so scaling things down in the Kata world is a good thing.
It's a good thing. And to put that to rephrase that as a scientific approach, right? So the first thing you would do is you would form a hypothesis. And that might be a Kanban would help, control inventory, establish flow in some area of the business, right? And you just pick like you say, scaled down area where you can truly learn whether or not that process or the benefits and the consequences of that process, right?
Well, and if you look at how a hypothesis is formulated, right, there's almost a checklist you can go down. First of all, is there any reference materials about the topic?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where, as a coach to, say, somebody that's running a Kata thing, you may say, well, certainly there is. You can go read this, here, I'll give you that. That's where they're kind of getting their background information from. And then is there one clear prediction they can make from that hypothesis? Well, yeah, we'll never run out of sandpaper on the line. Okay. And then, it's got to be testable.
Exactly. That's the key. Test, right? You got to get to doing it, and doing it in a way where you learn sooner rather than later.
Right. And then there's got to be an independent variable, something you change, and a dependent variable, something you can observe or measure.
Right.
That's the 4 main parts of a hypothesis.
Yeah. I like it.
So that's why I say scaling things down to a little tiny thing lets you try it at a much faster rate too.
Faster, right. Because
I mean, that's
knowledge is an asset. The sooner you acquire it, the more it'll appreciate over time, right?
yeah. I mean, every day. So at my last factory, and I was there 4.5 years. Almost started off as a consultant, and then they hired me as a COO. And so for about 4.5 years, every day the CEO and I hit the factory floor and had report outs for almost a solid 2 hours on Kata.
Is that right? Interesting.
And we were about 300 employees, I think, at the peak. And we built custom orthotics. So we're building children's braces. And there are 44 different styles of brace, every one of them custom to a kid's foot or an adult's foot. I mean, we're talking from preemie babies to full size
Wow,
adults.
that's essentially job shop in its at its core.
Oh yeah, and it is. It's a huge job
Right.
shop, and we only had people either paid a little extra money to have it shipped in 3 days or shipped in four,
Wow. Okay.
but everything went out the factory by the fifth day.
Man, that's you really gotta be a lean operation in order to achieve that.
Well, and plus the kids got to decorate them.
Oh, okay.
What's a brace without the kids being able to
Just adds
decorate them?
another element of craziness to the process.
Right. So, I mean, you've got number one, you're trying to get a foot to post neutral. Depending on the handicap and what's going on, the practitioner has to say, well, here's what you need to do to manipulate the foot. Plus, you've got all types of bony and stuff in your feet that you don't want it rubbed off and calloused and all
Oh,
that
sure.
stuff. So, lots of padding. There's different plastics have different characteristics for what you're trying to do for the foot.
Hmm.
So this would be like a Papa John's pizza with 20 different types of dough, um, 30 different types of sauce, and 2,000 toppings. I mean, that's essentially what this was. So to say that lean doesn't apply to a job shop, I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
Kata fits in very well with it because it allows you to get in there, take that little snippet of a problem you have, and run experiments around it to eliminate it.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I
And
think
so,
that concept of lean doesn't apply to this and that. It's a lot of people have these prepackaged definitions of what lean is instead of just looking at it like the combination of approaches or the mindset you use to improve or bring more value to the customer with the least amount of resources consumed.
yeah, and the interesting thing is, we had the same challenges any other factory had. We have a multicultural workforce, where we had Vietnamese, Russian, Spanish, all different languages spoken in the shop.
Well, just to make it even more complex, huh?
Yeah, yeah. To make it even more complex, we had supply chain that went from Vietnam and Korea to Mexico to the United States to Europe. I mean, so we had an international supply chain, uh, and our Kanban was a loading dock.
All right.
So these practitioners would take a cast of the child's foot, write down what they wanted in the brace, stuff it in a box, and ship it to us. And when it got to our loading dock, we opened it up, and that's when the clock started. And we never knew how many were going to be there a day. And we were truly a seasonable business
So
because what?
how
Hmm?
did you scale for demand? I mean, did you use a lot of temp workers or
No, no, we didn't.
how did you flex
So,
around? Let's say you show up one day and there's just a ton of orders on your plate. How did you handle that?
well, we would have as much as a 20%. And so it was understood you were going to work overtime to handle that extra flux
Gotcha. Okay.
because you can't be late. I mean, if you think about it, there aren't that many orthosists around the United States. So some kid, you know, may live 150 miles away from that doctor's office. Now, if you've taken a special needs kid and get them ready for a trip, it's a big deal. And
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, it was grandma and grandpa bringing the kid.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And whether they're in a wheelchair or whatnot, they've got to plan the whole thing. And so, last thing you want is the kid arrives and the brace isn't there.
Yeah, it could be a problem.
Okay, so we knew based on the data that we collected, um, how many we could expect every day. I mean, it was a general Kentucky windage type measurement, but it didn't really fail us that much.
Is that right? Interesting. So we had
I
a
mean,
pretty steady flow of orders.
yeah, there's going to be 3 or 4 peaks during the year,
Right.
at the end of school, at the beginning of school, and at the end of the year when the insurance is going to flip over and everybody wants to spend their last bit of money before the new deductibles kick in.
Right. Oh yeah, got you. That's what drives the seasonality. All right, so it looks like we lost internet at Hal's end, and he's out in Washington now, and they got extremely high winds. So we'll close out there. We'll probably pick up this conversation at a later date. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll continue to provide some really great insights. We got several other podcasts to do in this series, and just stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Bye.